And on this episode, we're going to be talking about team building. So, the class we've been running for about 5 weeks. We're trying to figure out which teams are most productive with one another. So, we've been putting you through a series of exercises. You've been building projects. We've been debriefing them every week. Really kind of figure out, okay, who's the best match with who. Since we all have similar values, actually, productivity is the most important thing when building teams. And we build teams before we actually start tackling problems. So, the last 5 weeks or so, every week we've been pairing you guys with a new team member, figuring out you've been having to figure out communication, you've been having to figure out that team member, but all the while, each one of you have been building your own podcast. So you've had to do the production, you've had to find people to interview, you've had to pick a topic, you've had to build a brand, you've had to grow the podcast. And through that, I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons and you've banged your head against a wall a few times as things went horribly wrong. So tell us about this experience. What have you learned? What are the biggest things that you've learned?
One of the biggest things I've learned is to just start. It's so easy to stay in this ideation phase of like figure out, okay, what is my brand? Where do I go? What do I talk about? Who's going to be on my podcast? And there is like, do that for a little bit, but then just put something out there. The minimum viable product, it's the MVP. You got to just put something out there in order to see, okay, is this actually where I want to go? Is it getting a good response? And where can I go from here? Do I want to change directions or do I want to keep going in the same direction and just fine tune it a little bit? So I would say just start.
All right. So you say that with a lot of confidence now, Cassie. Previously, we had some discussions on this. Did you come into this with that personality, that mindset, or is that a lesson learned the hard way?
That was definitely a lesson learned the hard way. I spent so much time on like the first few episodes, actually, I would say the first two that we did, so much time in the planning and the ideation phase that when it came to actually executing the podcast, I was so not happy with how it went. And I was like, man, if I had just done this sooner, I could have changed directions sooner. Um, and actually like heard the product, heard what I was putting out there and been like, oh, this is not how I thought it was going to go. I need to switch things up. So yeah, it was definitely something I learned here.
Definitely. So you also use a term called minimum viable product. How would you explain that? What is a minimum viable product? What is the importance of building a minimum viable product?
Yeah, so this is a concept. I don't know if it's from the Lean Startup. That's where I learned it. The Lean Startup is a book. If you are trying to start anything, a business or an organization, a product, whatever it is, I suggest you read it. But yeah, the minimum viable product is pretty much, okay, what is the least amount of work that I can do on this and still have it be functional, operational, um, like what is the least amount of product that I can put out there and get a result, um, in order to get feedback from. So it's like the roughest of the rough draft. Sometimes it's even an idea that you just put out there and see what the response is. So yeah, that's how I would explain it. That's how I understood it.
Definitely. All right, Luca, what was your MVP? So if you actually did it, what does your MVP look like?
Not my proudest work, I would definitely say. So my MVP was a bit of a technical disaster. So I had like an hour of troubleshooting like technology when I was trying to record it. I sat there. It took me like 3 hours to get the actual recording, and the recording only like 35 minutes long. So the raw footage was only like 35 minutes long, and it took me forever to get the tech issues resolved, like everything else resolved. I had a nightmare of a time with the editing software. I didn't know what I really wanted to go into saying, you know, with what I was specifically wanting to do with my podcast, like what kind of like theme was gonna have. And so I would say I definitely agree with Cassie, but to add on to that is just start and don't be a perfectionist. Don't assume don't try to like make it perfect and presentable every time, because if I think this is a quote from Josh, but if you're not embarrassed of the first couple of times you tried something, then you started too late. So
I can't take
put it
credit
out
for
there.
that. That's a Paul Graham quote, but yes,
Okay.
I believe it's true.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but along those lines, just really just don't put too much thought into it. You know, do the best you can with what you have. Put as much effort, put like 100% effort in, and try to make it as good as you can now. But once that due date hits, or that time that you set for yourself hits for a project, just release it. Just whatever it is, whatever format it is, it's in. Just do your best for the time being. Release what that is now, and then reiterate next time. You know, and another lesson on top of that would be communicate with anyone you work with. Uh,
Yeah.
We had partners in this. We were paired randomly with partners throughout this, and I would say communicate as much as possible. Like oversay something more than undersay it. Um, and be honest with that. Be honest with the way that you can communicate, because I ran into issues myself. I came down to like a day or two before the podcasts were due and we were reviewing them. And I was like frantically panicking because I need help on this, 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 and this. And my partner was just like, "Hey, you seem stressed. Do you need help?" And I was like, "Yes, I need a lot of help." Oh, all right. What do you need help with? And we got it all done. It got out on time, but the stress could have been avoided so much more if I had just not like if I just asked for help and communicated and let them know honestly like where I'm at in the process, because there's nothing wrong with not knowing what we're doing. There's nothing wrong with not being perfect. Don't be a perfectionist.
That's awesome. Any other major lessons that you would pass on to someone who's trying to build something for the first time?
Yes, leverage your resources and your connections. So this kind of ties into as an individual and when you're working on a team. There were so many times that at the end of the week, so our sprints, like our work time on each episode was a week long, and often I would get to the end of the week and thought back, saying to myself, "Wow, this person is really good at things that I'm super weak in." And I really could have used like that to my advantage in podcast, in working with them even more so, and leveraging their strengths, and vice versa. Like they could have leveraged my strengths. So like for example, I was wanting to grow in platform building and my partner was brilliant in platform building. We talked about it maybe once that week. So yeah, definitely acknowledge your partner's strengths. And use them. Like they're there for a reason. They're there to help you grow, and you're there to help them grow. So yeah, use each other's strengths. And if you have any connections, ask for referrals. One of my favorite episodes was my last one, and it was a referral from a friend who thought that she would be a great fit for the podcast. So yeah, definitely leverage your resources and connections when starting anything.
All right. So the lessons that I heard, just to repeat them back for everybody. If you're building a project for the first time, you're building a company for the first time, you learn from scratch. One, just start, build your MVP. If you're not embarrassed by your first product, you waited too long. It's never going to be perfect. The iterations are more important. So kind of the name of the game is to learn as fast as possible, which will lead into don't be a perfectionist. So yeah, get it out, iterate quicker. So that would be a big lesson. Other one is communication is going to be super important. So as you're working with team members, make sure you're actually communicating, feedback, asking for help, leveraging people's strengths, which goes back to Cassie, which is leverage your resources and your connections. Make sure we all have a ton of resources available to us. Don't work in a silo. Ask for help. That pretty much cover it.
Sounds about
Yeah.
right.
All right. So if people want to listen to your projects, your podcasts, what are they?
Mine is called A Seat at the Table by Cassie Solis on Spotify.
Mine is called Little Infinities, and it's on Spotify. So yeah, feel free to give it a listen.
And then let's look at the whole class. So everybody's doing a podcast. For you guys, so you can't say yourselves, like which podcast do you think stood out above the rest that everybody should actually go check out and listen to?
Grace Roberts. She
Why?
did her podcast on people within her circle that have amazing stories to tell and are using those stories to help other people. And so she's giving those people close to her a platform to promote like their organization or their charity or what they're about. And I think that that's a really cool thing to do. So definitely go check hers out. It's very worthwhile. It's called Leaking Joy.
Nice. Luca, what do you think?
I would say Devin Cornea. Because you definitely saw him like building, like you can see in the podcast him building up to and going through changes as like I guess like a micro business or something like that, or like a micro project or platform. He vastly changed a lot of the things that he was doing, and he did drastic changes because it didn't fit with what he wanted at the time, and so he would change it constantly. And I think that that's a really good example of just put something out there. It's not going to be perfect. You'll figure it out along the way. But if you're too perfectionist to put it out there, it will never get done. You'll never see the final product.
It's good. All right, guys. Thanks for coming on. Next week, we'll have a whole new set of 2 episodes. We may even bring in some of the other students from the class so you get to meet them, talk about what everybody's good at, what they've learned. But until next time, thank you. And we'll see you in probably a week, 2 weeks. We'll see. Thanks, guys.